Commanders at Seahawks. Seahawks favored by 6. Somebody do some research. Have the Seahawks ever covered a 6-point spread?
Somebody do some research.
Someone do some research for me. Can we get the crack research team going here?
It's this podcast in a nutshell. Somebody do some research ever once.
Somebody look up some numbers for me on Seattle. There's no way they've covered a 6-point spread. We just did this a couple weeks ago. I can look it up in the spreadsheet here. Talk about the game. No one bets against Sam Howell as a 6-point dog on the road. No one does that.
Certainly not twice.
Not twice. Can't do that twice. So Seattle did not cover 3.5 against the Browns at home.
God, stop. We can't. No. This cannot be the show.
They did cover 7.5 against Arizona a couple weeks back.
Uh-huh.
I have every game in here.
Great.
Did they play that week?
So
certainly didn't cover against the Bengals.
Sam Howell, being the most interesting quarterback in the world, actually wasn't sacked that many times last time he played.
Yeah, Seattle was 6-point favorites against Carolina in the Dalton game, and they didn't cover that.
So the last 2 games that Sam Howell's played, right, which is Philadelphia and New England, 2 teams that you would think that's a massive concern, sacks, for a guy that's averaging like 6 a game. 1 sack against the Philadelphia Eagles and 3 sacks against the New England Patriots.
Yeah, he's getting better.
Well, he certainly has in those 2 games, which would be 2 games that you would expect to have very high sack numbers attached to them. Does that actually represent a shift in Sam Howell, or did we simply get 2 games where he didn't get sacked a lot where he should have been? Seattle, they're not as incompetent at rushing the passer as they once were, but it's a much more favorable matchup than the last 2. Like, if we have another game where Sam Howell's only sacked once, twice, now we've got something going here.
Seattle's another team where if you just look at the pass rush grades and even the sack totals, their best pass rush grades came in weeks 3 and 4 against Carolina and the Giants, who we just highlighted on the show. I mean, they're both bottom 3 offensive lines. The Giants are in a different stratosphere when it comes to that. Seattle's another defensive line that, I think they've improved a ton on the line, but they had a game like last week where they were pretty much shut down other than Boye Mafe and one play by Leonard Williams. So I don't know if they're going to if this was 3 weeks ago, I said this could be one of those weeks where Seattle's defensive line at least looks good because they'll get to Sam Howell, they'll get their 5 or 6 sacks, and it'll be like, hey, Seattle, their pass rush has done this a few times this year. But Howell's getting rid of the ball a little bit quicker. And the other thing about Howell, we're 10 starts into his career.
Right.
10 starts into his career. Theoretically, I know I always say not everybody just gets better every week. It's not Madden. And I'm not saying that about Howell. But if there's one thing that could improve, it's just getting rid of the ball on time. And where does Sam Howell need to improve? Just throwing the ball on time, not running into defensive tackles when they're being blocked. He was doing that so much earlier this year, which is why we said it's not just the offensive line. It's mostly Howell when it comes to the sack totals. The last 2 weeks have looked much better for Sam Howell throwing the ball on time and protecting himself a lot better.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think he can improve at that. Like, it's not – he was so extreme that it would be wild if that was his – like, that's where he's going to be forever. Now, the question is how much can he improve? Because it's not like we're only working on NFL evidence here. We saw this in his college career. It is a feature of his game that's probably always going to be a feature of his game, at least relative to other quarterbacks. But if he can move the line – and head back towards normality relative to other quarterbacks, that's a huge thing for them because he is throwing the ball pretty well. I mean, basically 6% big-time throw rate, that's high. That's amongst the better quarterbacks in the NFL over a given season. 3.4% turnover-worthy play rate is not egregious. I mean, that's where Justin Herbert is this year with his double play rate. So that's fine. That's like middle of the pack. We're high-end in big-time throws. His sort of average, completion rate, adjusted completion rate, these kinds of things, these are good. If we can eliminate just a portion of the sacks we're taking, that's one of the sort of strongest levers he can pull in terms of moving his overall production.
In addition to when we saw him make a nice throw to Jahan Dotson last week. Dotson's going to be questionable for this game, as is Curtis Samuel. But that group with Terry McLaurin, at the top, decent group of receivers to throw to, and I think Howell gets the most out of that group. Other side, Emmanuel Forbes watch for Washington. Had a nice week last week against New England. Got to match up against a fellow skinny receiver like Tyquan Thornton.
Fellow skinny receiver.
Fellow skinny guy like Thornton. This week, though, because you're big into this stuff, what happens when Emmanuel Forbes runs into DK, potentially?
Yikes.
Because we know Forbes struggled with DK's college teammate, A.J. Brown, this season.
If they let that happen, somebody needs to get fired.
Just keep an eye on it. Just keep an eye on it.
Like, there are mistakes that are made that are so bad that people should lose their jobs for them immediately. If Emmanuel Forbes is covering DK Metcalf and not Tyler Lockett, what are we even doing here? Like, we're just setting the kid up for failure if that's happening.
Commanders' 7th lowest EPA per play allowed in the pass game. Could be a nice Geno Smith bounce back here with DK, with Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba's emergence. Washington also has these weird Jack Del Rio splits throughout his career where they seem to get better in the second half of the season. That year where they were good defensively in 2020, I believe it was. They started out horrible and then got better. It's kind of been a trend. So I don't know how much to lean into this or if Washington has actually turned a corner after a good week last week against New England. But something to keep an eye on there. They have not been great so far this season. And Geno Smith overall playing pretty well. Still has to cut down on those turnover-worthy plays, though.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you going in this one? Seattle by 6.
Washington.
Yeah. Same.
Easy.